There is much talk of foreign interference in the United States, but there is little talk towards some of the most vicious kinds of foreign interference that come in the form of multinational gangs that are not just gangs themselves in their own capacities, but are also arms of terroristic regimes that seek to do America harm by infiltrating it domestically. And I think that the gang we're going to talk about today and the organization we're talking about today is indeed an example of one of those gangs. So in an interview I did before the election happened, which so this is post-election now, but I did this before the election happened. I spoke with a expert on Venezuela, a young Venezuelan student who came from Venezuela, who's now in America, who loves our country, who has insight on the gang Tren De Aragua and what they are trying to do within America. So I hope that the following 20 or so minutes of a conversation is enlightening to you. I hope that you enjoy this episode of Pensive Politics. Again, I'm Christian Watson, and I hope that all of you engage and we think hard and we think long about the future of our country and the safety of our communities. Thank you guys so much. Enjoy the interview. Bye-bye. So joining me to talk more about Tren De Aragua and the impact they may have on the election and the general public safety in the United States is Erik Suarez, someone who I've had on this channel before to discuss Venezuela and socialism. How are you doing, Erik?
I'm doing great. It's great to be here again, and I'm happy to talk to you.
Absolutely. So, before I get started, I would like you to just tell people a little bit about yourself. Again, I've had you on the channel before, but some people we've gained new viewers since then, so they may not necessarily be familiar with you. So, just talk a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, well, I'm Erik Suarez. I am a Venezuelan immigrant to the US. I've been here already 6 years. I went to Penn State, and since then, I've been a very strong conservative. I've been always an anti-communist. Therefore, I am very a big supporter of Ronald Reagan. And like basically, since I've been here, I've been very active politically, so the US doesn't make the same mistakes that made my country the socialist hellhole that it is.
Absolutely, and that's wonderful, and I appreciate your work. You do a great service to all of us, and I think that people like you and others that come from other countries, who live here, who love our country, who share what I've called this worldview Americanism, who are actually not just Americans by virtue of legal status, but Americans by virtue of philosophy. People like you, I think, are the lifeblood of the nation. So I appreciate you contributing your skills to the preservation of our republic. So. Tren de Aragua. So this has been a popular campaign issue. When I first reached out to you, I think this group is actually more low key in terms of the coverage coming out from the mainstream media than it is now. Over the past 2 or so months, it's gone from just coverage of what's happening in Colorado with the apartment complexes, the allegations surrounding that, to apparently being a multi-state operation, and it's become a hot button issue due to the crime that's been happening in America recently. So tell us about them. Tell us about their origin story, if you can, and tell us, what do you think their significance is right now to America in 2024?
Yeah, so for context, Tren de Aragua is a Venezuelan gang that got started in Venezuelan prisons. So Venezuela, we there was a big prison system in the sense of that the prisons were used to kind of punish certain young people who aren't necessarily 100% in allegiance to the, let's say, the regime. So there, most of gangs in Venezuela are used as an arm of the regime and to, let's say, crush individual protests, especially in poorer areas or in the favelas, if you want to say like that, favelas in Venezuela, especially in Caracas. But certain people who weren't, let's say, 100% under the regime or they were kind of shaky, that's when those people are sent to the jails. And within those jails, Venezuelan jails, if there is something, they're definitely not a good standard on the sense that you can go inside a jail and you will see a lot of commerce, you will see parties. There's like they're everything. They look more like malls than they look like jails, if you can say that way. So within those systems, those institutions, the Tren de Aragua gang was born. And something that they do that is very different from other gangs is that they thrive when they're locked up. So they have learned how to manage the prison systems, not only in Venezuela, but when they started leaving the country, they were also spreading to Colombia, to Peru, to Ecuador, to Chile, to Argentina, to many other Bolivia. And something that characterizes them is that they are very good at thriving within the prison systems. So they send a few, they get caught, they go into prison, and they start making connections with other members, other criminals, and they expand within the prison system of different countries. They grow, and then when they are released, or when other criminals are released, they expand, and that's when they are very dangerous, when they are already outside. So they grow in the prison systems, and then when they start like leaving, that's when they are, let's say, at their peak of danger. Um, and yeah, I mean, they're very dangerous now, especially because the deal that was unofficially made between them and the Venezuelan regime was, we'll let you guys leave Venezuela. We'll let you guys, not be confined to the prison system in Venezuela. And in exchange, you're gonna go to many other places around the world, around the region, so Latin America and now in the US, and you're gonna serve as an arm of the regime out abroad. So a very specific case where we know this happened is in Chile. There was a former military of the Venezuelan military who was against the regime, and he was a political exile in Chile. Well, these members of the Tren De Aragua track him down and murder him in Chile
I
as
remember
the
seeing the story.
regime,
Yeah.
yeah, as the regime thought that it could be a potential danger for them in the future. So this is extremely dangerous. I don't have to explain why, but not only as a regular criminal organization, but also as an arm of a tyranny and a regime that poses a direct national security threat to the US.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And this is actually that kind of leads into what I was going to ask you. I was going to ask you if they had any formal connection with the Maduro regime, but apparently they do. And so let's actually kind of explore the danger because a lot of people may not necessarily see the immediate connection. So theoretically, so Tren De Aragua, they're across several states right now. Colorado seems to be one of their hotspots. Theoretically, if a local official began speaking out, because one of the things that media observers have noted is that local officials are being mealy-mouthed about this, they're being silent about this, and to the extent that they are speaking out, they're trying to just punt the issue and trying to avoid it entirely. If a local official were to speak out and to call them out by name and to mention what was happening with them by name, that could make them a target for like a hit from Tren De Aragua. Is that true?
Well, it definitely is a possibility. That's something that has happened. Like I tell you, like they when they grow to the degree that they're growing in the U.S. And they aim to, because we see it in different other countries in the region, and this is Latin America. We know that they want to also become like any other gang. Like let's remember Salvador with the MS-13. Gangs eventually aim to have also political power. In Mexico, for example, last election, more than, I think it was 30 or 50 candidates were literally killed by gangs just because they knew that these candidates could potentially start having action against them. So it wouldn't be a surprise. I don't think that we have any confirmation about those statements, but it wouldn't be a surprise if these gang members are starting to grow to the degree that they're growing. We know that they already have apartment complexes. We know that they threaten these people to try to like say that they're not really there when they are. We know that they're already engaging in drug trafficking. They're engaging in human trafficking, extortion, illegal transfer of arms, and some of them. For example, in Peru, they already are dealing military grade weapons towards other gang members and things like that. So the problem with Tren De Aragua is that their aspirations are high everywhere they go. They aspire for political pressure. They aspire for criminal dominance over like, they're not your average criminal. They are literally organized crime in a way that Colorado has never seen before, and maybe Texas has seen with other criminals, but Tren de Aragua is already expanded to a degree around the continent that cannot be underestimated.
Absolutely. And so there's been a lot made of the brutality of some of the attacks they've undertaken. And I wanted to ask you about that. Do you think, well, just more generally, because we've seen it from a lot of South American gangs, there is a particular kind of brutality. And I don't want to mention names, but you can probably think of some of the gangs I'm talking about that, behead people, decapitate limbs, things like that. Why do you think we see that level of brutality shown to their enemies? Is that a cultural thing? It's something that is, I think, to many people in America, people with Western mindset, is really unthinkable. Because normally our street gangs that are domestic to this country, if they want to kill you, they'll just put some bullets in you and that'll be it. They don't, no, most of them don't go through the extreme lengths that we see gangs in the East, like the Yakuza, go through, or some other gangs that come from South America. So, what do you think that's all about?
Well, because traditionally speaking, gangs within the US have never had that goal of expanding to a degree where they are a direct threat to political institutions in the US. With this, I mean like the average American gang is not aspiring to put political pressure in a politician, so they are either stopped, so they stop messing with them, or to have political pressure in within that state or within that country. South American gangs are different. MS-13 had political pressure in El Salvador. The gangs in Mexico, literally, they're killing politicians who will go against them because they want to put pressure on politicians so they don't go against them. Um, Very recently, there was an election in Mexico, and one governor, I think it was, the next he lasted one day, and the next day he got, beheaded, and they put his head on top of his car. These are beyond regular attacks. These are fear tactics. And to be honest, some gangs in Venezuelan gangs, Tren De Aragua, gangs in Mexico, and gangs in El Salvador are more close to terrorist organizations than the concept of the average gang that the American has. And that's
Mhm.
very important to let know. Actually, Texas declared the Tren De Aragua as a terrorist organization, and I think that's the correct approach. And most importantly, we cannot just capture these people and put them in the system, because that's how they thrive and how they operate. That's how they grow. What we need to do is grab these people, judge them, and kick them out, close the border and not let them back in. Or if the crime is too heinous, we need to get them the death penalty, because we cannot allow them to grow. They cannot stay in the system. That's the worst thing that could happen in the United States.
So, one of President Trump's cardinal accomplishments that he oftentimes harps on is at the beginning of his administration, he directed DOJ assets to go into New York State, particularly, and root out MS-13 presence in particular communities. He did a pretty good job, although I think most of it was what you talked about. Most of it was putting them in the system, and gangs like that tend to thrive. So I think that he did a good job optically, but substantively, that it may have been a half measure ultimately. So it looks like, as of the recording of this video, that he has a decent chance of winning. I don't want to jinx anything. Looks like it. I hope he wins. But if he does win, and if you were put in an advisory capacity for his administration, how would you tell them to handle Tren De Aragua on a national level, leveraging the assets of the federal government?
I would do it the same way that the first step I would do, like Texas did, declare them a terrorist organization, because that's what they are. At this point, they're actually trying to enforce fear tactics to have dominion over territory in the U.S. And that's basically the definition of terrorism, especially because they also have political gains. They want to have political pressure. Um, that will be first step. Second, uh, don't judge them under the civil uh, judge system. They should go through military trial, because they're not only a terrorist organization, but they are a terrorist organization trying to take control over large areas of the U.S., engage in criminal activities. And third of all, they are, they have connections to the regime in Venezuela, which is a direct national security threat. And third, based on the crime that they commit, because not all of them have the same role. Some of them are direct murderers. Some of them are more, average drug dealing kind of situation. But if they're foreign nationals, they should get out of the country, those low level crimes. And if there are like straight up murderers, they should face the death penalty. It's directly like that. And they definitely should not be mixed with other American criminals and other American, let's say, the average American criminals, because they will introduce and recruit from American prisons and expand Tren de Aragua and expand and teach, let's say that way, the modus operandi of how they do it and how they operate. And that's the worst thing that could happen in this country when it comes to criminality and the way that crime happens in America. Tren De Aragua is probably, in my opinion, the biggest direct threat to the United States of America when it comes to national security.
The biggest domestic direct threat, correct? You think?
Yes.
Okay. Now, from what you're telling me, from what I've seen, that does seem to be correct. So last question. Let's do a sort of a nightmare scenario, just so we can map this out. Let's assume that Tren De Aragua does manage to expand into U.S. prisons more, does manage to teach its tactics to United States gangs that are domestic to us, and their influence continues to go unabated, or if it is abated, it's unabated effectively. What do you see their power and influence being 10, 15 years down the line? Do you essentially see, in the same way that Iran has sleeper cells within the United States ready to activate any moment, do you essentially see them the same way for the Venezuelan Maduro regime? Or would they be much more of an active and sort of terrorizing force than just mere sleeper cells? What would the impacts of that growth and influence be?
I don't have to speculate. I see what happens in Peru. In Peru, there's large, let's say, whole counties dominated by Tren de Aragua gangs. All small and medium-sized businesses are extorted, so they need to pay to the gang members some degree of, like, let's say, taxes. Like they charge them for security, which is basically, if you don't pay us, we're gonna destroy you, kill you, and destroy your business and kill your family. Um, I think that's their goal because they definitely they operate, and their goal is to operate in that line where they're big enough to enact and to pressure society and to pressure politically, but also they know that if they overextend, they could become targeted directly on a bigger scale. So it's about their measuring, and I think that I for the U.S. context, I think that you will see like a border dominated by the Tren de Aragua, human trafficking rising to degrees that you've never seen. They will be in charge of like moving people inside the United States through an open border that they will dominate, and you if you pay them the good amount of money, you're gonna be seeing a lot of terrorists coming in, people who murders, things like that, and that's gonna happen, and you're gonna see whole counties, especially probably in around the country, in many suburbs and bigger cities, places where there's a lot of small and medium-sized businesses, cities especially, where it's going to be under the crime is going to hike to degrees that are incomprehensible to a regular American. And I know this because that's how life was in Venezuela, a life where if you go out after 8 p.m. you are already in danger of not knowing if you're going to be stopped by a bike and going to be knocked by bullets, or you're not, like that's how life was in Venezuela.
Yeah.
That's how I grew up. So it's the complete destruction of society to a degree, um, that you guys have never seen before. And I think that if that nightmare scenario where nothing gets done, I wouldn't say 20 years, I will say 10, 5.
Wow.
They
5 years.
act very fast. In
5 years.
Peru,
Wow.
I would say that it took 3 years to get to the point that it is now. 3 full years where they did nothing, and they operate fast. That's how they work. And right now, 4 years of Kamala Harris, I think, would be where they keep entering to the degree that they're entering, and where DAs are not prosecuting because they care more about DEI stupidity than actually enforcing the
Rehabilitation.
law. I think that will be actually in 3 or 4 years, you can have a whole, you know, operation of Tenderawa already established in the U.S. And many states, especially the states where Democrats have the DAs. So I think that's what and I don't mean it like a way to like exaggerate or things like that. I think that the Tren De Aragua is probably the biggest domestic security issue of the U.S. in this moment.
No, and it's not being talked about in that way either. It's being talked about as just another example of the rising crime in Democrat cities. But that kind of minimizes what you're telling me. What you're telling me is that not only could we have a terrorist organization have several fronts established domestically, we could have a terrorist organization that is at the behest of a foreign leader that hates America, that wishes to see us destroyed, whose regime has repeatedly attacked America and propagandized Americans against our own government and our own principles. He could be commanding them. That could have massive implications. Forget for the president. The governors, sitting governors of states could be in danger. State senators could be in danger. Judges could be in danger. And they would have like literally national level assets available to them to carry out their operations. That is absolutely terrifying. It's terrifying.
Yeah, and that's the case in Mexico with their guys. That was the case in El Salvador. So I think the biggest mistake that Americans do is thinking, well, we will never be like those countries because it's impossible. We're the United States. I'm sorry, let me tell you, if you don't act and you take for granted the liberties and the security that you guys have, and just because and you think that you're above just because you are the United States, let me tell you, if you don't fight for these things, and if you don't, you know, demand the politicians and people to uphold the law, these things happen way too fast, and you blink and it's gonna be here. It's already starting. It's not normal. I never heard before that they take apartment complexes hostage. The killing of Lake and Riley was by two Venezuelan Tren De Aragua members. They didn't mention that, but that was the case.
No, I didn't
It's
even know that.
already,
That's
it's
interesting.
a,
I didn't know that.
yeah, it's
Wow.
already denominated a terrorist organization in Texas. Some states are acting better than others, but this needs to be a national security issue, a national, federal level issue, not just state by state.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for being here, Eric. Do you have anything you want to plug or say before we sign off?
Just that, well, always a pleasure being here. I hope that we can talk about other issues in the
Of
future.
course.
And also that, like, just warning Americans to take action to vote the correct way. So, for people who want law and order, um, and especially those who are in the suburbs or in cities, be careful because this will affect you more than the rural America. This is going to be in your communities. So yeah, vote accordingly.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right. Thank you, everyone, and stay pensive. Bye-bye.